Hey, this is the Average Fellas podcast. I hope you got your coffee ready. Let's talk some business.
Had a vision of success and where I wanted to be.
And I had never owned my own business. I had never worked for myself.
And when I was ready, I told him, I'm sorry I have to leave your company, but I need to start my own dream,
Because it's a business. We're a business too.
Right.
Like, invest in yourself. Don't just.
I mean, they replaced the refrigerator with like one of those fancy coffee makers.
Hey, welcome to the episode of the Average Fellas podcast. I'm your host, Zodizach, coming to you live all the way from Riverside, California on another beautiful Monday morning, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my goodness, the sun is shining. I'm enjoying my coffee, like always. Ooh, nice and hot. Speaking of coffee, drop by the website, www.averagefellas.com for your specialty craft roast coffee. That's right, we got a 4-ounce bag. That's a monthly subscription for $12.99. That includes the shipping fee. Also got the one-time purchase, which is a 12-ounce bag for $19.99, and that includes the shipping fee as well. And that is a one-time purchase for the 12-ounce monthly subscriptions of 4-ounce specialty craft roast coffee. Awesome. Also, check out the other services we got there. If you have a product and you want to take some photos of it, we built out a brand new product photography studio. I'm going to start posting a lot more content related to what we can do in the studio on the website, on the YouTube channel, here on the podcast. We're starting to develop more of that stuff right now. Got a ton of new backdrops just came in: yellow, white, blue, purple lights, green lights, different color, mix and match everything. I'm super excited for the studio. We'll be able to do some really cool stuff for any of your products, whether it be food, shoes, apparel, whatever it may be. Let me know. Shoot us an email at averagefellas@gmail.com, and let's get connected. Maybe we can do some business. We can take your product shots for you at our studio, and we can do a whole entire thing about it. I can post some content about it. I can make YouTube videos about me taking product photography shots of whatever it is that you're doing. Anyways, so get at me. That's the Average Fellas podcast. Drop by the website, www.averagefellas.com, okay, for more of the services that we offer there for any of your web needs. We also build websites too, so let us know if you need help building a website, getting a website, putting something out there on the internet. That's what we do. That's what we're here for, right? Okay, anyways, today's episode is something super exciting that I'm excited about because I'm posting snippets of a conversation that I had with my friend Daniel back in October of 2020, I believe. I want to say probably even before that. I don't remember. I think it was even earlier than October. To be honest with you, it was I can't really remember exactly. But we sat down and we had a conversation about the internet, about putting something out there on the internet and how different strategies work to your advantage to market yourself out there on the internet. And my friend is I think I want to say he's like a digital marketing growth expert sort of title is what he sort of has, that he kind of works under. He wouldn't tell you that he's an expert. He's a real humble guy. He's a really smart guy, but he would never tell you he's an expert. But this is just sort of the field that he works in, that he's sort of kind of crafted his little niche place to work, because he has no formal training in this. This is a job that just sort of out of necessity has sort of developed over the years for him. He sort of found his way into this somehow by the luck of the internet. He figured it out. So obviously it wasn't his first choice of gig, but it turned out to be this weird, ugly monster that he just loves. And so we got to nerd out and have this really cool conversation about the internet and how marketing strategies, concepts that myself these were early days of the podcast for me. He was explaining some things, giving me some knowledge, so that way I can produce the podcast and put it out there on the internet. And so the next couple weeks, I'm going to start incorporating some half-hour chunks, because I think it was a 3-hour conversation. I'm not sure. Well, maybe 3 or 4, maybe I would say 2 or 3 episodes we can get out of the conversation that I recorded with my friend Daniel. And I'm going to include them in the podcast because I think they're valuable. They're valuable to me. I go back and listen to them so I can learn something. I could hear a new strategy, refresh myself on a strategy that he had mentioned insights that I can go study, little topics that I can go pick up ideas from, and then go travel down the internet rabbit hole, discovering more about it, trying to figure out who the authorities were in those spaces, and then figure out what the concept actually was from them, because there's a lot of crazy stuff out there on the internet that you don't really understand. I don't really understand. So having my friend Daniel explain some of these ideas kind of introduced me, give me an introduction to, I guess, the internet, marketing strategy, something, I don't know what you want to call it, traffic, the internet game. I have no idea what you want to call it, okay? It's just a weird thing. So once again, some of the stuff that we talk about does sound kind of sleazeball-y just because there is terms in vocabulary in this internet lingo that sounds weird. But, if you can get through that, this conversation I thought was very helpful for me when I started producing this podcast. And it's why I continue to develop my website. That's why I continue to, be a web developer now. Now I'm making websites for people. Now I'm, trying to make content for people. This internet place needs to be filled. There's space out there in the world on the internet, and I can fill it because I know how to do it. And I'm a creative person. So, my creative side had to put something out there in the internet, and, now I think there's a way to now, use it. So, and that's sort of where this journey is kind of led. So once again, I hope you guys enjoy this conversation with my friend Daniel. It was a great conversation. I valued this conversation. As a matter of fact, I valued it so much that I still listen to these conversations. I still listen to this conversation that I'm even going to post it for you guys because it was valuable to me. I want you guys to listen to it. So if you have any kind of project out there on the internet, if you have any kind of a goal to establish some sort of internet traffic or sales or job, business, whatever it might be, creative work, maybe you have some music that you want to put out, release out there on the internet. Listen to some of these, these episodes that I have. I'm going to call them Podcast Marketing School 1, Podcast Marketing School 3, because that's originally what I called the files. The original files are called Podcast Marketing School because my first thought was, if I had this conversation with my friend, he's going to drop so many knowledge bombs. I'm going to need to go research them and dive deep into this world. And that's what I pretty much did the entire COVID situation with the podcast and the internet, was just really kind of devote myself to trying to understand how I could use this to my advantage as a creative person, as a person who wants to start my own business. These concepts were valuable to me. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoy it. All right. I think I got through it all. Every time I had to do that. Every time I had to do that. Anyways.
You gotta get it in one breath.
Get it in one breath.
So diaphragm is ready for the rest of the podcast.
Exactly. So today I have a special guest who is going to help with some ideas that I've been working on, and hopefully I can return the favor and give some feedback, help with his ideas. But really what today's thing is for is to learn and to listen to these concepts and listen back to this track and hopefully use those to help market my own podcast or product, whatever that is, in the future, hopefully. So my guest is my longtime friend and one of the bro clan, one from the clan of us bros. You're out there. You know who you are. You have a cigarette mark on your butt that you did with the rest of us.
Because we're in a gang. 209.
My friend and brother Daniel, what's going on, my guy?
Happy to be here. Just chilling. Finally, first time in Riverside, having some drinks and getting ready to talk about some real nerdy marketing numbers today. So it doesn't all sound very sexy, but I promise that the results end up being quite sexy. If you should.
All right, Daniel, can you talk about what your experience is and what your wheelhouse is when it comes to marketing and digital marketing?
Yeah, so the title that I currently have is Growth Marketing Specialist. It is a little more specifically with digital. My experience actually begins 5 or 6 years ago. I was working in Silicon Valley at a startup in Sunnyvale called Telepathy, which was this crazy wearable. It was like right when Google Glass was a thing. And this was like the Japanese answer to it, and they did a big thing at South by Southwest, and they actually had nothing of substance made. So it was vaporware basically. And I got brought in at the end of it. I didn't realize it was the end of it because my brother at the time was in like the video department, and his boss, for some reason, was going to become the CEO after they didn't like their super Japanese visionary guy.
Wow.
And they're like, he was like, oh, I would love a literate like assistant basically.
Yeah.
And Ferg was like, my brother just moved back from New York. How about that? And he's like, oh, can he read and write? And like, is he trustworthy? He's like, yeah. And he was like, do you want a job? Like, I think I got you a job just now. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Like, I've been back in California for like a week.
Yeah.
And I like just started looking at hotel jobs, and I didn't really want to do that anymore. Because I had come out of service. I was a night auditor.
Yeah.
You know the grind.
I know the grind.
Yeah.
The night audit grind.
I did. I had some In-N-Out burgers, some night auditor. Like, I've dealt with the general public.
Yeah.
You know exactly what that's about between Starbucks and your own experience in the night audit scene. So yeah, when I first got into the world, like the barrier to entry was basically just like, are you literate?
Yeah.
And do I trust you? And I did a good job there, so that the COO, the chief of operations there, when he started a company, a couple months later, called me up and was like, would you like to be our marketing guy? We're a 2-person team. We need a third person. We want a marketing guy. You did a good job for the couple months you were there. And we were essentially just overseeing the place go out of business. So it wasn't like, there was nothing really to be done.
Right.
At one point, like the CEO got upset because they were transitioning, and he had me type out an email explaining the piss he took to send to the other CEO. Because he wanted more updates. So he's like, take a note of this. And I was like, what? And he's like, I had a very powerful stream. It lasted for 30 seconds. And it was a little on the yellow side of dehydrated. And it had a faint odor. And I was like, are you serious? He's like, yes. Type this out and hit send. To what was effectively my CEO.
Yeah.
And so everyone in the company thought I was a spy for this Eric guy. And Eric was like a really Brooklyn guy. So he was the camera dude. Like, like who the fuck gave this guy control of this company? And I owe technically my entire career to this one guy.
Oh my god.
And he did give me one good piece of advice at one point, which was after it was all over. That's actually where my computer came from. Is I have multiple laptops because I've worked for enough failed startups that they're just like, yeah, take it with you when you go out the door.
There you go.
But yeah, he was like, man, in 5 years you're gonna be 5 years older, and I was like, oh, for some reason that stuck with me as being like weirdly potent, but also like so simple. That it's crazy. He's like, you'll see what you do. In 5 years you'll be 5 years older. So anyway, that is a bit divergent, but it does sort of get at the heart of accidentally stumbling into this, working on these sort of pirate ship operations.
Yes.
And ultimately, eventually, by necessity, gaining a set of skills that was actually useful later.
Yeah.
It starts there in a horrible little place. And
Called the Silicon Valley.
Yes. And then the next company was Viewfine, which was another kind of Google Glass clone, which was effectively just a wearable TV monitor you could slap on your glasses. It literally plugged in with an HDMI cable into your phone. Or we eventually found some use cases, but it was mostly not the most useful thing. I'll try to avoid saying anything more negative about it than that while being recorded.
Oh, man.
It was run by a lovely man, Goro Kasaka. But, and in there, what we did is we went, our first thing was to go to Kickstarter. So we did a huge, actually, it was super low-key, like tapping friends and family for, I used my brother for making the video, and it was like whomever we could hit and pay the least amount of money we could possibly pay.
Right.
So we actually did run like a super shoestring Kickstarter, which, at the time it was still like Kickstarter now is sort of a pre-order platform.
Yeah.
It's like Sharper Image. People get to buy into it, and they have like people are addicted. They'll have rooms of Kickstarter shit. Like,
yeah.
This is all my Kickstarter furniture. This is my fidget cube. These are all these board games and this art and etc. And comics and everything. But when we were on it, it was still sort of the early days of it being like, oh, this is the platform to crowdfund your dreams.
Right.
And we actually did surprisingly well. Like, I was terrified. We put it together in like a month and a half. I'd never like planned a photo shoot, never had to like do anything with product. Like, for me, it was my absolute first go. I didn't know any of the things I know now in terms of like how to effectively do it and how to monitor it and adjust it based on those analytics. And the fact that it worked at all is still deeply surprising to me, because it shouldn't have.
Oh my god.
So, yeah, in the first day, like a day or two, we hit like $50,000. It ended up stopping at like $205,000.
Wow.
So, it just like fluke, just hit a bit of luck. It all worked out well enough. And I still didn't quite understand what my job was, and it'd be probably another year or two before I really understood like how all of this stuff works, how to get clean data, how to utilize that clean data to make like actionable, informed decisions. And yeah, it started so much of it through just luck and random chance. So I'm fortunate for that and grateful for it. But eventually, it did become like actual work and an actual job. And now I have like you were saying earlier, the toolbox. The toolbox has increased. I have a lot of tools in it now.
Yeah.
Before, I didn't even have like the box, and I had like a crayon that was broken in my pocket from like a Chevy's that I didn't want to eat at, but I had to eat it.
Oh my god. That's how I feel right now. I feel like that because I don't know. I always tell my guests on my podcast to tell me, I feel like this is shit. This is like an airplane. This is an old rickety biplane.
Yeah.
And I gotta sail this thing like through the Bermuda Triangle. And every episode, it feels like I get in the Bermuda Triangle, it's gonna fall apart. It's just bubble gum and like string holding it together.
Yeah.
But somehow I got through at the end of the episode, and we're still rolling with 20 plus episodes. So it feels like that. And I imagine that's kind of like how you felt when you first started, like, like doing this job. Really, you just kind of felt like, where am I? I mean, I'm just floating in the wind a little bit. But like you said, you gained that experience, and so that's kind of that's why I'm recording this, because trying to mine that knowledge and that experience, and obviously I respect you, and I've always seen that you've had success in that. So I
Thank you.
want to ask you these questions for that reason.
Yeah.
So continuing with that, can you elaborate on analytics? What that means? What are analytics for like those people who just don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way in which we engage with content and information now is so diverse between devices and between sites and apps, and just everything. So take for example the podcast. You push it through one place and it pipes it out into all these different places.
Right.
You have a couple different social media profiles. You have your website, and all of that is disparate information. So it's all sort of siloed in its own places. So to be able to figure out what is effective and what isn't effective, what kinds of people are showing up, when they show up, what days perhaps are more interesting or more effective than others. Like, for some reason on Tuesdays this always works, but our Friday episode is doing terribly. That, and also just to see what kind of content is working. So with analytics in general, you're getting user information, like what kind of people are showing up, gender, age. It can be kind of alarming, like if you get into the back end of Facebook.
Oh gosh.
And this is pre all the Russian hacker stuff. Now you actually do have to. I accidentally went through for like a political account.
Yeah.
And they sent me like a postcard. I had to sign it and send it back, and I had to send them like my driver's license, and like I had to give them proof of my address, and they needed a social security number, and it had to be notarized. It was a whole thing. So if you're on political ads on Facebook now, it is actually quite difficult.
Wow.
But before that, you could figure out someone's exact location, their age, their gender, their political leanings, their like annual income, their level of education, their ethnicity.
Yeah.
You could drill into sort of a disturbing degree. Is really what I first kind of learned doing this work, is that social media really is just a way to trick people into being like one massive focus group. It's like, oh yeah, tell us what you like.
Yeah.
Show us. And then we will sell ads to you. Or we will sell ads to other people so they can target you very specifically. So that might be sort of the evil side of analytics. Except for me, data is just data. So as long as you're not... That's why they did have to do all the stuff for Facebook.
Well,
they had to reel it in because the platform had become too powerful.
Right. No, I totally agree.
And whether Zuckerberg is doing a good job with it now, a whole different debate. But we don't need to get that deep.
But here's the thing, though. We're harnessing this power as the average fellas.
Yes.
And we're going to use it against them. Yeah. We're using it against them.
It's true. Is you need to, you need to be able to map it out and understand what can be done.
Exactly. So I'm going to sell Mark Zuckerberg my game.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. You hear me? Zuck. I'm about to get zucked.
He's definitely going to play the robot side of that game. He's not going to have any fucking humans. So yeah, in short, anyway, analytics are the data that is collected by your devices and your websites and etc.
Right.
And
Okay, so yeah, so like basically, like jokes aside, analytics, practical application of using them.
yeah, so currently everything is fed to you through various algorithms, and the way things are networked and sort of grouped and clustered it's sort of different between every platform. But like Facebook, Instagram is for one thing, and you have Google. Even Bing does factor into this. Like,
wow.
just honorable mention, Bing. We're here for you.
Shout out.
Yeah, the digital marketing people that understand. Like, you throw some money at Bing. They have way higher conversion rates because no one uses it. So, but for some reason, the people that are there are like super happy to be there on Bing. So they see an ad, they're like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm gonna click on this. You get like a billionth of the audience, but for some reason they're more active. Those Bing people.
Wow.
So shout out Bing. But yeah, for you, for example, is taking kind of all of your social media and putting it into like a social hub, kind of like a Hootsuite or a later.com or something, and to be able to see across all platforms like what people are engaging, and like, oh, on Instagram this kind of thing does really well, but it doesn't do that well on Twitter, or it's not doing that well on Facebook, or vice versa. So that way, as you're posting things, you have real-time feedback of what is and isn't working.
Yeah.
So as you start honing your stuff and being a little more scientific about it, it's really all very actionable, straightforward information. The difficult thing with that is something I faced doing that first Kickstarter, is like, we all exist in the world and we all hate clickbait.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, occasionally I'm just like, I see a stupid clickbait title, I'm like, I fucking hate myself, I'm clicking it.
I'm clicking it.
I want to know. Tell me 10 things about Star Wars or whatever I didn't know.
Tell me about male enhancement.
Yes. I just want to be Joe Rogan.
That's it. I just want to be Joe Rogan.
Someone give me a Bowie knife, some psilocybin, and some male enhancement. I'll shave my own head. So it's being able to utilize all of that in meaningful ways. But as I was saying, which I had sort of forgotten, sorry, was when I was starting, I wanted the ads I wrote to not be clickbait.
Right.
I wanted things to just not. I hated that bullshit. I didn't like it. And then you would A/B test. So you'd have like, you'd use the same audience, give them 2 ads, ad A, ad B, and one I would write like what I thought was like some proper English and like an intelligent way to communicate across a Facebook ad, and the other one which would be just clickbait nonsense.
Yeah.
And you have your favorite child out of those 2. You can't tell them that, but eventually the data just proves that your favorite kid is terrible, and that the clickbait always wins.
Oh my god!
So, everyone is out there being like, "Oh, 10 ways like,
yeah, exactly."
They're clicking it, so it is. So it's sort of a double-edged sword where it's like, oh, you're making more informed decisions, but sometimes now because you have the data to back up your decisions, you're not. You sacrifice a little bit of integrity at times to be like, oh, I want to be effective, and to be effective, I need to sort of take on a little bit of a persona and be a little bit larger than life in a way that is more advertising-y and that people respond to, even if it's not quite one-to-one what you might have wanted for you or your brand.
Yeah.
At least at first, until you become enough of a thing that you can start dictating it. But when you're on the other side of it and you're just like riding the waves of what works.
Riding the waves of trends.
Like, I'm going to surf this, like,
yeah,
make these numbers work for me. So it is something to figure out. But everything does, like, people do like to refer to algorithms and stuff a lot. And I think the reality of it is that no one actually understands what the hell's happening.
Right.
And that everyone is just kind of figuring it out. But like with ads, with SEO, with everything, just how content is delivered is like this huge. There are teams and teams of people at Facebook and Google and everywhere else like trying to figure this shit out.
Right.
I'm not convinced that there is really an answer, or if there is, it's a moving target.
So here's the thing for me is it's like, okay, like if somebody else can like if there's a Google room like in the Google like business where there's 10 people throwing ideas and bouncing it off each other, looking at this data and being like, yo, because here's the thing, I don't think there's professors in those rooms are like, people who are educated in statistics enough to make an informed decision on like what the outcome of like what you do as a result of these statistics, right? I don't know if
Yeah.
there's a person who is like the professional at that, but I do feel like you said, it feels like people are just like bouncing ideas off each other, and there's a Wild West element to it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think, one day when the robots teach the history of how they defeated the humans, it will begin with these algorithms.
Dude, for real.
Not to get too reactionary about it, but like, yeah, the way like Google categorizes and indexes things, and just the huge auction. Like at my current job, my CEO would ask like, "Why isn't this ad delivering to me when I search these key terms?" And I'm like, "Well, it just isn't. Like, I'm sorry. It's just delivering to all these other people and it's converting. Like I can prove to you that it's doing something." And he's like, "Well, why isn't it working immediately?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry that I cannot currently explain to you the largest, most complicated ad auctioning system on the planet. Like, most people can't." The short version is like for Google or Facebook, you're delivering an ad to a certain amount of a certain type of people, or for certain keywords. Like if I search podcast, who is coming up for that search.
Right.
And so now you're entered into an auction, and everyone has a certain amount of money they're willing to spend to bet on someone who Googled the term podcast.
Right.
But when you think about, like, on an intellectual level, that's very easy to understand. But when you think about, like, just the myriad variations on it, spelling podcasting correctly, like, everyone coming at that and people throwing money at it, it's like, it becomes, like, almost infinitely complicated, like, very quickly.
Well,
and they're doing with every single word or combination of letters, like, in the world. Like, it's...
Right, so it's
in different languages. Like, it's wild.
There is a numbers game that you're playing. It's like playing roulette, right? Imagine you go to Vegas, you're playing roulette, right? And in roulette, I have a strategy where I try to play 2/3 of the board, okay? And because my payout is 3-1 on a 2/3 bet, and if I win, I'm covering the majority of the board, so chances are that I will win more than I will lose.
Yeah.
So if you play that the long run, you're trying to like somehow play that slim margin the long run, right? So it's sort of like that when it comes to like SEO, which brings up my next question, search engine optimization. My podcast, Average Fellows Podcast, those words, it's a simple name. I don't know why other people aren't competing.
I'm still blown away by it.
I'm still blown away by it.
I fully expected to Google Average Fellows Podcast and not see anything about you.
Yeah.
Pages. Pages of you.
Dude, call it a blessing in disguise, bro. This is like the Matrix. I'm neoing my way into the business.
Yeah, you have the entire first page of Google on your search term, which is wonderful.
Exactly.
So
for as far as the SEO game, I'm what is that called? Uncontended.
Yeah.
Yeah, uncontested Average Fellows Podcast. All right, I'm gonna keep it that way too.
Exactly. So the SEO is definitely like a long form game, as you want to have authority over your terms and your domain. Like if you're going to Google the term Facebook and Facebook doesn't come up, like, now you fucked up.
Yeah.
Like something bad is happening.
Right.
So when it comes to something like podcasts, right, you're trying to break through into a world that, as its God King, has psilocybin, Joe Rogan with a rock hard dick from like Rhinocorn supplements, and is like just mainlining kratom until he transcends time. So that's the North Star, right? He's the most popular thing.
Exactly.
I mean, you've got your Mark Marons,
he's
and
in
Kevin Smiths, and
he's in the, what's that called, where all like the pantheon of podcasters. Yeah. He's the main pod. He's Zeus. Yeah. Joe Rogan Zeus.
Just mainlining kratom and rhino horn with a Bowie knife. Sorry. And so what you want to figure out in that case, and there are a lot of different tools that do this. Moz is one. I'll just use its name as a stand-in because I'm blanking on a couple of the others. But so you want to do keyword research. Mm-hmm. So if you look up podcasts, ranking for the word podcast, like being on the first search of Google, probably not attainable.
Right.
Even running ads for it, probably not attainable. Because it's so convoluted. It'd be like just doing ads for music, You got to get more specific. And so you can do a lot of keyword research and figure out like what are the most searched terms around podcasts in general. And you could use someone like one of those pantheon people, like a Rogan, and see kind of with their website, like what's working for the website, what's working for this. And the amount of data you can actually pull out of those things is pretty wild. Some of them get expensive, but most of them have like a free month trial. And really, after you do it once,
Yeah.
unless you're like a real company where you need to be constantly monitoring and maintaining. But for most people, you get that data once, you work on it for a while, then you get another email address.
Maybe.
6 to 8 months later, maybe do it again.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll catch on eventually, but they don't care. They want enterprise clients. So then you figure out like, oh, there are 100 words for podcasts that generate a ton of organic clicks.
Right.
So at this point, we're talking about inbound marketing. So this would be part of your inbound marketing strategies. Like people who are coming to you, it's like, what are you putting out in the world that gets people, either word of mouth or social media. They see you, they see your content, they're interested in it, and they want to search you out.
Yeah.
Not people you're actively, not your outbound strategy. So SEO is definitely long-term inbound marketing strategy. And once you can figure out those keywords that are popular, and you can figure out your own kind of branded keywords, like for you, you'd want to make sure you lock down average fellas.
Yeah.
Or a couple other things, things that you feel are associated with your brand. You could sort of word cloud it and even see like, oh, what is the search volume for those terms?
Right.
And like, what do you want to invest in that?
Cloud. So by word cloud, you mean like, here's the big cloud, average fellas podcast, and then branch out and be like average, and then fellas, and then podcast, and then average fellas, or then like, average podcast, or like average humans, average man, average woman kind of stuff.
Yeah, and kind of start to figure out like what in there is noise that you don't need or don't want.
Right.
And what in there is useful that you would like to attain but
Right.
can't yet. So like things you're going to work on, like I'll just use the term podcast. Like that you want when Google indexes your site for it to know podcast website.
Yeah.
And ultimately what you will teach Google is podcast website, average fellas, and a couple more terms that will come to define what you're
Right.
about. And you'll want that stuff scattered through all these different pages and all this other stuff so that it's treating you correctly and serving you to the people that search for you with its magical algorithm.
Right. So, and that goes to assigning values to every piece of content that you post, right? Well, for me, it'd be for every piece of content I post, I want to assign the value of Average Fellas Podcast. I want to assign the value of podcast. I want to assign the value of, I don't know, just, who knows, best podcast ever. Who knows?
Yeah.
Something like that, right? And every time, like if you go to any of my social medias, any of my pages, any of my whatever it may be, Google is somehow coding those words, associating them with those enough times so much that I guess it's like a frequency sort of kind of thing.
Yeah, Google will eventually learn what you are and what you're about and who wants you.
Right.
Which is sort of interesting. But you're basically you're giving Google the tools it needs to teach itself what you are so it can sell you to people. Or
Yes.
it can deliver you to people.
Yes. Okay. That's,
maybe I should use a different verb than that because that almost sounds religious.
Yeah, delivery.
that it can, yeah.
Well, because you talk about, so this is talk about noise, right? So like
Mhm.
you have a certain network of influence on all your social medias, like I do,
Yep.
friends, families, or whatever, right? But then beyond them, to reach a new market, to
Yeah.
get into a untapped market, to get your product, your voice, whatever it is, into a larger market, more exposure. That's what we're talking about as far as like connecting these SEO, these keywords, teaching Google to recognize who we are, so that way it can present us to those other markets.
Exactly. So at this point, ultimately there's an audience of people that listen to podcasts.
Right.
It's X large. So out of that slice of the pie, like what is it, like who in there would be interested in what you're offering?
Right.
So now it's like, okay, what words are sort of associated with that? And also with your brand. Like you don't want to just lie to people because you can do that.
Yeah.
You can just create a page that's like or a brand that's so SEO'd out that like people are finding it, but it's like, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And Google will figure it out if it's completely irrelevant. So at the same time that you're navigating sort of these small wins, so maybe you figure out that like, oh, podcast's too big. I'm a guppy in that ocean. But like entrepreneurship podcast or like some kind of normal, like you just had a musician on, maybe some music-based ones or small business-based ones.
Right.
Maybe entrepreneurship itself is still too large. And you break it down and you find those places where you can like win.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, well, I might be 30 keywords down and I might be in the thousands instead of the tens of thousands or the millions in searches. But in these places, it's less contested.
Right.
So I can utilize some creative language, still having it aligned with the brand and everything, but making sure that you're in places you can win.
Right.
Is you'll want to have just your terms, average fellas podcast and whatever you're specifically about. Like, if you build it, they will come eventually.
Yeah.
It's then finding the strategic ones that are like, okay, podcast too big. Like, what are the 20 things under this?
Yeah.
And then picking the ones you think you can eventually win. But again, the SEO stuff is definitely very long form. Like, it might take, like, maybe every 6 months you'll see a creep.
Right.
Every couple months, and it is a low cost way to do things, but it is long form.
It pays off in dividends.
It's slow. Yeah, like you might be doing it for a couple months and just like, oh, what the fuck? Why am I doing this? And eventually, like when you have that in place,
yeah,
and everything else you're doing, like it's just creating a really strong foundation. So is like having everything settled for sort of an inbound marketing strategy and having it ready for that is really a good way to do things. And it seems to be sort of a more millennial type of thinking. Is like before you used to just be like all ads, like just push, and now people complain about our generation because we don't buy enough diamonds, etc. And it's like, oh, but they'd rather have experiences. And it's like,
right.
They want to, you want to hear from a friend, like, was this good? Or you want to hear from Yelp even, as much as some people complain about it. But everyone wants to know, like, you want that, this was good, I did it, you should do it. Yeah. So you want that, like, inbound marketing of, like, oh, I listen, like, when we can ever return to water coolers in the future once the pandemic has eased up a little bit, you want people to be at work and be like, oh, man, I was listening to this podcast about this one thing. It was super awesome. And they're like, oh, what was that called? Podcast. Yeah, what was that called?
The Average Shells Podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Is that's the only people out there you can probably count on to actually check it out is someone who's getting like kind of either a hard recommendation or is actively searching for it. Like these are people who will convert and will be downloads for you.
Yeah.
And will be listeners. And now at this point you kind of have a library of shit. Like you're already building it.
Yeah.
So I imagine, I'm not a huge podcast listener myself, but that people get into it and start binging it.
Yeah. Well, that's the goal too. So like for me, like, okay, so here's the thing. Let's go back to SEO and keywords, right? So what I think I noticed about about the data that I have on mine. So I have upwards 20 episodes already on my podcast, right? And the data that I've collected so far, I noticed that episodes that mentioned Star Wars and Mandalorian pinged a lot higher, and the retention rate was a lot higher than the other episodes.
Yeah.
And my only inclination of like reasoning why is because right now Mandalorian is trending, right? Because season 2 is coming out at the end of the month. And so that's why I think that those episodes kind of picked up. I showed a lot more, like I said, download and also retention time on it.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. Some of my episodes, 0.
Yeah.
Some episodes, 0, man. And I was like, oh, man. But I mean, every episode has downloads, but on some platforms it's 0, right?
Yeah.
So like for me, Apple Podcasts primarily where everybody listens to everything. So Apple people. Well, this is the thing about Apple, right? If your podcast is not on Apple, then you're messing up already, because every Apple phone that is sold comes with the app already installed on your phone.
Yeah.
So
I didn't realize for a long time that the term podcast had just become ubiquitous. I thought it was just an Apple thing.
Yeah.
I was an idiot, but
yeah, no. Now it's
I had to watch some Mark Maron TV to be like, oh, podcasts are real. Like people listen to this shit.
Yeah, dude.
Because I mean, would have been years ago. Like I'm not that behind. But
it's strange though. It's
they put that shit out there like 10, 15 years ago. Like,
yeah.
Like podcasts have been around.
But the difference now, though, is that it's becoming a media that is it's a credible media now, right? So before it was just a hobbyist kind of thing, and now that they're seeing it, well, let's put it this way: I think they just crossed something like the 100, like the one, like I don't know, 100 million like podcasts ever created, where like YouTube was something like 30 million or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So if this goes back to the numbers thing, like you talked about in SEO, where if you put yourself in a smaller pond, you can stand out a little more, right? So as a creator in podcasts, you stand out a lot more. I get a lot more foot traffic in podcasts than I do on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So just on Apple Podcasts, more traffic because it's a smaller pond.
Yeah.
So that's something that I realized too, and that's why I'm thinking about that's why I wanted to ask these questions, because it is a numbers thing, and to deny the numbers is like, here's the one thing too, is like you could have a good product, but if you don't show it to enough people or get in front of a lot of people, you won't snowball enough to actually make it worthwhile.
Oh, completely. what I do professionally is essentially the least romantic side of all this, because it's like the number is absolutely crucially important, and also if you're really good at something but terrible at marketing it, like no one cares.
Yeah.
Which is also very sad. So it is. It's the sexiest non-sexy thing ever. And when it comes to it, it's like, I mean, like you mentioned with Mandalorian, and using Star Wars, is those are places where you can swim with the current. And even though it might be too big for you to like stand out a ton, even just like the runoff, like even just what's like spilling over the top of the gutter that is Star Wars,
that
is still like such a fucking massive amount of stuff.
That's the Average Fellas podcast, getting that spill off.
Yeah, it's like, but I mean, it's not like you're not a Star Wars fan. Like, it's not like you're faking it to do it, like just to be a whore.
Yeah.
It does make sense, and I think a lot of the people who would be Star Wars, or who are Star Wars fans, would likely. I mean, everyone that loves Star Wars, right, is Luke Skywalker. They're living in Los Banos, California, or in Modesto, right?
Exactly.
Modesto is Tatooine. That's where.
Dude, tell me about it, man.
So we grew up in Tatooine. That's how I think about it. Is Central Valley is the first thing my dad did when we moved to California, or to the part of California to Los Banos, was he drove to Modesto because American Graffiti was one of his favorite movies, and he just drove around.
You know what's so funny about that is that my wife's sister actually has a like Yelp like drive tour, a touring, or like a George Lucas tour.
Really?
Yeah, and I was like, no way.
Nice.
I'm gonna market that. I'm taking that idea. I will drive you around Modesto.
Yeah.
For $30 and tell you where George Lucas did all his stuff, right?
Right, because I mean, it's
That's
funny.
an experience.
Yeah, and it's weird because George Lucas is known by most people for so little compared to who he actually is.
Yeah.
And even just the fact that there's some of his heart is in the Central Valley. Is like,
Yeah.
I didn't know that for a long time, and then but like I suppose what I intended to say was, anyone that is a fan of Star Wars is like has that binary sons moment, and I think something of that resonates in the average fella's sort of ethos, if you will. So I do think that seems like an honest place for you to make that connection and try to take that overflow. And that's the thing that you can, I think, kind of figure out is, my roommate is an artist, and I've been complaining to him. He's like, oh man, don't have any fault, don't have this, don't have that, but it doesn't really work that hard at creating it. I'm like, man, all you have to do, like, you're a dope artist. Like,
yeah,
everyone's talking about Avatar this week. Draw Aang, draw something, like, post it.
Yeah,
you're an artist. You like stories. Like, it's not being dishonest. You're not being a whore. Like, you're not selling yourself out for something that you don't believe in. Like, just if you care about it, and you think it can ultimately help the thing without tarnishing the brand at all, then do it.
Right.
So I think the Star Wars thing, as soon as I saw you post like a Star Bros, I was like, I know what he's doing. But at the same time, I wasn't like, he's cheating now. He's putting in cheat codes. The son of a bitch is putting in cheat codes. No, I was like, this makes sense to me.
It did, because it does. Because my brother, like my brother and I, it goes back to that Star Bros scene. Like, my brother and I were Star Wars fans as kids, and like growing up,
the amount of lightsabers that were destroyed on
Front
Drive.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, when we didn't have lightsabers, we fought with literal shovels and broomsticks. Like, sometimes it feels like we grew up in the 50s. They were tumbleweeds, Zach. We were latchkey kids.
Hey, there it is. You heard it. You heard it here on the Average Fellas podcast. That was my boy Daniel, good friend of mine, one of my best friends. Smart guy, fun guy to hang out with. Had an amazing chat with him. I think that was back in October. I want to say, I think it was October. I can't really remember, but it was a while back. And like I said, this conversation was valuable to me, and I hope you find some value in it. And I got 2 more parts to it that I'll probably share. And we'll keep the ball rolling with this. And then I'm trying to schedule some conversations on Mondays, like I said, with a couple of the guys here. We can keep tossing ideas around about how the internet works and what's working out there. So anyways, thanks for listening, guys. Once again, drop by the website, www.averagefellas.com, for your specialty crafters coffee, or for any web solution that you're looking for. You need to get your products posted. We can always take pictures of your products for you. If you need to get a website built, we can always build your website. Let us know. Let me help you out here. Average Fellas Podcast. All right, guys.